Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I am the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, Thriving, Not Surviving, How Texas Rose to the Pandemic Challenge. And I'm going to turn this over to Burlington English, who is our sponsor today, because thanks to their sponsorship, this webinar is completely free to you, our members. So I'm going to turn this to Robert Breitbart of Burlington English. Robert.
Thank you, everybody. And it's rarely been that I've been as excited as I am now to join with you all. This is an amazing webinar you're about to view. And again, hope everybody is safe and healthy out there. And congratulations to you for taking the time to such a commitment for your students. We know we have a ton of Texas folks joining us. If you happen to have missed our Texas specific webinar just the other day, please know that any of your Texas folks with Burlington English would love to recreate that for you. It was fantastic participation. For everyone across the country, you should know it's really a brand new Burlington English that's out there. So everything that can be done back at the building on desktops and laptops can now be done 100% on Chromebooks and tablets, and particularly most importantly now on students' smartphones. So we can practically move all of your students to learning at a distance. And when we say all, we really do mean all. We really give you all the types of products that you need from folks taking their first steps in emerging in English all the way to advanced and bridge programs. So if you have the will, we have the way. As I heard someone say, well, Burlington has so much energy, we'll even help you with the will. And then lastly, before I turn it back over to Sharon, just know that everything, if you happen to be teaching online, everything that you would need to fill up your screen and engage your learners is all found in our in-class lessons, and all the familiarity and everything that you would want to do with your students synchronously is all going to seamlessly be connected to what the students are doing on their independent work. So with that, I thank you very much. We genuinely here for full complimentary support to help you enhance the programs you have and take new programs that you're putting together to a new level. With that, please join us. Just check us out at burlingtonenglish.com/contact. And like I said, if you haven't seen Texas and all their fantastic work, you're really in for a fantastic treat right now. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sharon, and thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you again for your sponsorship. I was just commiserating with our executive committee because, our very first webinar that we had back in 2017, do you know who our sponsor was? Burlington English. We had 73 people on at that time, and we were so excited and just delighted that we didn't have to charge our members anything because Burlington English picked up the tab. So here we are again. I just want to say thank you again, Robert. You've been a wonderful friend and partner to COABE and to the field. And not just in terms of financial support, but also with resources, as you just saw the wonderful resources that Robert mentioned. So thank you, Robert.
Well, big right back at you, Sharon, and to the entire COABE board. And if you're not a COABE member, you really should be. So with that, again, I'll turn it back over to you and to Anson and the entire team in Texas. You're doing amazing work. All right.
Thank you so much, Robert. So we're just going to pick it up real quick here. I wanted to mention our Advocacy April. So this is a wonderful time right now for us to be engaged with our legislators. We know that there is a real need for funding, both at the state level and also at the national level. So we have 3 asks out there. We ask that you would go to COABE.org, and you can see we're asking for $1 billion for COVID funding relief at the federal level. We're also asking governors and state legislators to look at that CARES Act that has been pushed down to the state level, and to think about adult education, because adult education is not written in that stimulus funding. So we've got some asks out there at www.coabe.org. It's super simple to take advantage of that. I also want to mention that we have our Capitol Hill Day that we expanded into Advocacy April. We have a number of states that are working with their legislators, setting up meetings from the comfort of their own home. So I want to encourage you, again, it's at coabe.org. And then also we've had a number of targeted webinars providing professional development and training during these COVID challenges. This is one of them, but we have 2 or 3 more as well. So you can find those out again at coabe.org. And now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Anson Green. And Anson is coming to us with just so much skill and knowledge. I'm going to read his bio real quick. Anson Green is an adult ed workforce and college trailblazer who has led and participated in adult education responses to natural disasters and recessions, including the COVID-19 lockdown, Hurricanes Harvey, Rita, and Katrina, and the dot-com bubble and Great Recessions. His passion is deploying innovative services for low-skilled Texans to meet their life's ambition. He loves challenging legacy perspectives and developing pioneering solutions. Anson led the transformation of the over $80 million Texas adult education program into a workforce solution for dropouts and immigrants seeking responsiveness to their college and career aspirations. He's a full partner to Texas employers, supporting staffing needs to grow the Texas economy. Anson has served as a National Research Fellow, has spoken at congressional briefings on effective approaches, middle school advancement, and had teaching posts at several colleges, universities, and public schools. In 2000, he served as a fellow at the National Institute for Literacy, studying women's barriers to education. His diverse background in adult development and education and workforce development drives a vision to deliver solutions to student successes. Wow. Thank you, Anson, for leading this. We really appreciate that. And everybody, if you could welcome Anson with me by posting your name and where you're from in the chat box and your questions in the Q&A. I now turn this over to Anson.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Anson.
Okay.
Looks great. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I want to thank all the folks that joined today. Robert, your kind words are not going to be forgotten. Very much appreciate it. And it came to my mind just a minute ago that one of the first people I spoke to as we started to realize what we were in for with the pandemic was Sharon. We did some early emails and discussions about how we could get information out to the field. So I'm nice to be back here with the COABE family. And I appreciate everything COABE has done to help bring our message out. I'm joined today with two of our great esteemed colleagues out of Texas here to kind of share what we've been doing in Texas. And I just appreciate this opportunity to communicate. I feel like for me, I find strength in community. I think a lot of you guys feel the same way. And we sure appreciate how COABE has reached out to, thousands of people on some of these webinars to get the word out and help us stay tight as a community. As you can see from our screen here, Texas has gone remote in a big way, and that's what we want to tell the story of. I'm happy with our presenters that I've brought along today because we kind of have something for everybody, I feel like. We're going to be joined by a presenter that's got just deep expertise in remote learning and distance learning in a variety of venues. And then another presenter that is pretty new at this, and she's an expert as of 6 weeks ago. And I think that's where a lot of practitioners are and teachers are in the field right now, is trying to figure this out. I'm going to bring a state perspective for those of you that are administrators and are trying to figure things out. Then you'll hear local coordinator experience and then instructor experience all in the next hour. So I'm really excited about that. Also, we got a nice mix of rural area and urban area perspectives. So I look forward to sharing that with you. I'm going to talk about the actions we've taken at the Texas Workforce Commission, considerations, constraints, and surprises that we've had as we've kind of rolled out our program throughout the state. And I feel like we've got some best practices or promising practices that really show how we found a recipe for rapid response in a situation like this. So I hope you'll really learn a lot as you're here, and we really look forward to getting your questions in the survey. We'll respond to as many as possible, and then afterwards we'll do the same and get that information out to you. My email address is on here, and I don't hesitate from taking emails from all over the place. So if you just have a burning question, for sure, send it out. If you have a question for a presenter, I don't mind being that point of contact either. Let me tell you, I want to tell the story of kind of like a 2-week transformation and kind of what we were able to do. We kind of drew a line in the sand of March 6th as the start of these events for us in Texas, because that's when the earliest date that a lot of our schools went on spring break, but then never came back. And so by April 1st, really in a few weeks, we were able to transition a state of 80,000 students and 5,000 instructors and a huge state, as you guys all know, to remote and distance instruction across the state. We have about 50%, over 50% service continuity, meaning students that were in brick and mortar classes that have transferred to remote. Policy clarifications and a dedicated website we stood up in a couple of weeks. We had an additional funding proposal to our executive management team put together, robust professional development on remote instruction, going out to our teachers, and we had an expert help desk on remote instruction and distance learning software, all stood up in 2 weeks. So that's the story I want to tell. And how did we do that? How did we get there? And some of the elements that we put in place that you might find useful for yourselves. And then we'll hear from local perspectives from our two guests on what they did to kind of move the needle forward. A little bit about our program. We are at a workforce agency, the Workforce Commission, so we manage a wide variety of other workforce programs, including the state's unemployment insurance system, which, as you know, has been inundated with calls for individuals and Texans that have lost their jobs. We averaged for a while there about over 1 million phone calls a day. So that has taxed our system. And in fact, several of my staff are working on unemployment insurance phone calls right now. And we've taken them off adult ed duties because we're really trying to do the best for our Texans. We have 36 grants embedded within those, about 65 providers, about 80,000 students. And we're a fully integrated system, meaning if you have a grant from our office, you're going to do the ESL and GED prep and high school equivalency prep, but you're also going to do IET, integrated EL civics, distance education, all of those things into one, family literacy included. So our grantees have a deep bench of expertise, and I think that has helped us out. Then we also have a long history, and this is where I want to spend some time today, in distance education. Distance education and distance learning is not an option in Texas. It's required of our grantees, and it has been since 2014. We invest about $1 million a year in mentorship and capacity building grants for distance. We've seen 100% growth in the share of students that are in distance education in the last 5 years. We have 30 approved distance learning curricula for use under the NRS. So we have a wide variety from VHS tapes all the way to the most advanced software and online programs, including cell phone applications. We are fortunate, and I think this has been instrumental, that we have a phenomenal professional development system out of Texas A&M University that has a deep bench of experts in remote and distance education that every week in the last month and a half have done 2 or 3 webinars that have had 200 or 300 participants in them just on remote and distance ed and related applications. And then we require in our grants a position for distance education. So every grantee also has a lead and an expert. Those are some of the building blocks, and I'll talk more about those as we proceed. But I kind of did some searching about how did we do things so quickly? What was the recipe? And I know some of my colleagues in other states have been struggling and are getting up to speed now. Some are still working on processes. So I want to give you kind of like my analysis of how we got there, maybe quicker than others. One is, as I mentioned, distance education is not an option. We have a deep list of approved curricula in all kinds of formats and fashions that really give us a lot of durability in terms of delivery. Lots of professional development. We have a digital literacy curriculum foundation, and we also have, as Sharon mentioned in the introduction, a deep history with emergency responses. So I mentioned distance ed is not an option in Texas, it's required. And that means when we went to remote 2 months ago, we didn't have a lot of questions about, well, what do you mean? Or can we do this? Or how do we do this? We already had infrastructure, and we had leadership at the local levels. And the discussions were more about transitioning direct classes into remote classes and less about all the other elements of remote instruction. I think that served us very well. We have our distance learning leads across the state in every grant. We have every grantee provides a distance learning plan, and they have for 6 years now. So they have a structure of details of how they implement distance education at a local level. And then we have tech integration coaches, a badging system for expertise in the state, and as I mentioned, extra funding we put out to build capacity. In terms of the curriculum, I mentioned we have over 30 different curricula, and this has proved us well. These are for proxy and direct hours, cell phone apps, and a wide variety of products. And that has just given us lots of variability. We knew early on if we locked ourselves into 1 or 2 platforms, that could be a limitation to us. And it surely would have been a limitation in terms of what we're doing today. But now we have a lot of tools in the toolkit in terms of distance delivery, and that has helped augment our remote delivery. And we have kind of understood this whole situation in 2 branches. The distance learning branch, which really has the structures that you're probably familiar with from the National Reporting System and the Department of Education, and then a remote instruction, which is not necessarily tied to a software or a platform, but could just be a class offered via conference call or via Zoom or via Google Hangouts and collects direct hours. So we have kind of segmented the 2 modalities there, and that has helped us kind of understand and build policy and practice around those. I mentioned lots of professional development in Texas through the Texas system out of Texas A&M University. Last year, we trained over 5,600 staff in distance education topics with 261 online PD modules being delivered. So we have online and direct professional development. We have a PD portal, which is a learning management system where we track and schedule a lot of this as well as give out credentials. And then we have a very robust community of practice. And you can click on that link there to kind of take a drive around the block in terms of how we have that structured. But that means we have, and we have exercised, and I would say our professional development system has been instrumental in helping us over the last 2 months get up and running and get the training out and deploy. That has been something that we could not mentioned a distance learning, a digital literacy curriculum. We developed this a few years ago. This is on how to use a computer, how to access the internet, how to use a mouse, basic stuff. It's free to use. We developed it with our state library system and has been very useful as we get out and start to bridge that digital gap and that distance gap in terms of our students that aren't up to speed or don't have access at the time. The last thing on these top 5, kind of how we did it, structures, would be the fact that we have as an agency, our field has, and myself have a deep bench of disaster recovery experience. We're the ones that have a history of running into the problem and figuring out solutions rather than asking permission first. And that has served us tremendously well. I personally have worked massive NAFTA layoffs where workers that were underskilled were laid off, hundreds and thousands of them back in the 90s, 9/11, the dot-com recession, hurricanes, most notably Hurricane Harvey recently, which impacted a tremendous amount of our Texas providers. But even back during Hurricane Katrina, Texas ran the unemployment system for Louisiana for a while. I picked up phones answering unemployment claims back then. So we have this built into our DNA as an agency, and I think I have that intrinsic feeling. Not all states have these major events. We've all been through the Great Recession, most likely. That was another one where we had lots of layoffs and lots of unemployment. And today, the Great Lockdown Recession, as it's being referred to, presents that new challenge. But I think this gave me and our field kind of a framework of rapid response. The picture here I love. These are our practitioners from Laredo, Texas, who drove 3 hours to Victoria, Texas on the Gulf Coast during Hurricane Harvey to help our provider clean up. So one provider helping the other. That's the Texas way. These situations are tough, but Texans are tougher. And we've done a great job, I think, in responding quickly. Here's a timeline of kind of our lockdown progression. And you can see we stood up remote learning guidance early. We put out funding for computer and computer supplies, guidance on bringing on new students. And this is something a lot of folks are struggling with, is how do I onboard new participants? And now we're in the realm of new testing and remote testing modules that we're putting out. And then what I think works, if you look at the structure here, empowering the locals. I try to get out of the way, give them the freedom to create and innovate. We created a single point of reference, which I'll explain in a little bit. We survey our providers every week. We get 100% response rate to find out what they need locally and what we're doing that we need to do faster or better. We've got a great frequently asked question document. We constantly brief our leadership, and I don't pretend to know everything. You can't. You've got to rely on your field to bring strength to what you're doing. I mentioned a single point of reference. We stood up at our professional development system at the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning at A&M, a website where we committed to host everything because we didn't want our providers having to dig through their emails, dig on different websites. We wanted everything in one place. It's providers, and then we opened a section for students. So students can go in and find out, is my class open? Where can I take a high school equivalency test? And other types of activities. So on this page, this is the provider link. You can find the things that you might be looking for. The email, the URL address is at the bottom of this page. But if you have questions about what we're talking about, you're going to find it on this website. 37-page FAQ, information on remote and distance learning, etc. So that has helped us. We created a single point of contact to make life easier for our local providers. I mentioned more money going out. On the 14th of April, our commission dedicated almost $4 million in response, disaster response for adult education. We rescinded a performance measure on measurable skills gain that was no longer relevant because testing was closed. That sent out $1 million immediately the next day to our schools. We expanded a grant that we already had in the works for follow-up services, meaning staff time, to work with students individually to hire more staff, but we expanded it to buy more equipment, hotspots, laptops, etc. Grants to develop online learning videos and resources that we're going to be working on. So we'll have little videos on how to do the Pythagorean theorem, how to do order of operations that are short, crispy, and tight that people can watch on YouTube and other formats. And then we have a student support call center so that from 6 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, a student can call and get help on their math when they're stuck and their teacher's not available. So we put money out, we expanded some of those efforts, and that's going to really help build our bench for the next phase. But our leadership has said, if you need more, come back. They're willing to go and look at other requests for funding. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the great city of El Paso, Texas, and Melanie Garcia, who works at Socorro Independent School District. And Melanie comes at this relatively new. So if you're a new practitioner, new teacher going, wow, I don't know much about how to do this remote thing, Melanie's going to be able to have her story for you. So Melanie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll do your slides for you. Thank you.
I can't get okay, here we go. This is just a wonderful opportunity and a shout out to Community Education Center. And so I have been teaching at the Community Education Center in the Socorro Independent School District for 5 years. I taught 4 years ESL, and this is my first year teaching English high school equivalency. And next slide.
Just wanted to say a few words here. If you weren't sure or remembered, Melanie just got highlighted in a in-session document from GED Testing Service. You can read her article. It's got some great insights on what she did as a practitioner. You're going to hear more of them today. So thank you, Melanie, for getting that Texas recognition.
Thank you. So as I continue, I'm going to go ahead and start. This is my timeline, and if you don't see a date, it is still ongoing. So this is the process. Start off with initiation. Now, we were in our first week of spring break. So March 13th, we had received emails from the district as well as our director, Anthony Fraga, about when we would be returning, even though it wasn't quite definitive. So I went ahead and I used the GroupMe app with my students. Been using that for about the last 3-4 years. I've been teaching at Community Ed Center, and just reminding them to keep studying what we've been learning and to go online with their studies, distance learning, and also the GED resources we had been working on. As part of the collaboration, this is pretty much when boots on the ground actually started. The consistent and concise emails from the director specified for us to reach our students via the mode of communication that we were all pretty much familiar with our students. And he reiterated that, have your students work on distance learning lessons. As Anson Green had mentioned, that's something that is required. And with us, we use Edmentum, even though other classes do use Burlington English and USA Learns. And so he also, Mr. Fraga, my director, also provided assistance on internet services and employment insurance and other information, the link to the Texas Workforce Commission. And there was also a survey sent out to us, the teachers and the other colleagues as well that I work with, my fabulous team, as to where we were technology-wise and our comfort level, the challenges we were going to face, scheduling at home, do we have a workspace? So I thought that was just very useful to get our minds really focusing in on this is going to be our new reality, at least temporarily. At that time, it was just barely March. And originally, we were going to go back March 24th as a district. So then here it was pushed to April 6th thus far. So there was also March 23rd was when we did a micro teams teleconference with the English as well as Spanish high school equivalency teachers and our assistant director, as well as our career pathways and transitions coordinator, our facilitator AB instructors, and grant compliance specialists. So they really wanted us to start honing in and share what resources we were going to use as a team, the platforms, everything. I mean, we basically, boots were really on the ground. They were on the ground and running fast. So it was amazing how everything was just so coordinated so well with my team. I would not have had the confidence if this hadn't started, to be honest with you. Challenges, well, I would say one of them was, I'm going to move a little further down to April 6th. We had new students enroll before spring break. So how are we going to engage our students, lead them into distance learning on top of remote learning? So I think that was one of the major challenges we've had. I had met most of them through orientation and the intake process, the registration, but there were a few that I had not. But calling them, just going, I would say, the old-fashioned way, just calling them. And, kindness doesn't have an expiration date, a starting or an expiration date. So I think calling them was the best way that I saw fit to reach out to them. And I still call even the returning students. Some prefer FaceTime. So those bring up the other challenges, is technological issues such as no laptop or laptop sharing, slow internet speed, poor connections. But again, as Anson Green had specified, our district too has also offered hotspots as well. And starting April 16th, the district started distributing laptops to the AEL students. They start off with K-12, and then they also started distributing them to the AEL students. So a few of my students, as well as others at our school, have received laptops, and they are continuing to receive laptops as we continue with this digital learning, so to speak. So that's been really neat. A couple of my students too, I feel like this time has really illuminated how students are actually just thriving, thriving being at home online. There's very few, but they're ones that are doing this are just taking this on. I have twin students, and they have completed a lot of us. So they are special needs. They are young adults, but they are really working very well in the Google Classroom, all the variety of materials and resources that I have there. Also, another challenge is scheduling. A lot of my students are mothers and trying to figure out when they're going to study. So pretty much my schedule is a 6-day, sometimes a 7-day work week on call. I will receive group me messages or post even personal text messages starting 8 o'clock in the morning until 9:45 at night. But some of them cannot start working until they put their children to sleep that night. So even have pregnant students, and so I'm there for them. That's the thing. I am there for them. So next is connection. Well, I already went through that with the laptops. And progression. So at the beginning of April, I had about 7 students working on the Google Classroom account. Now we have 27 students, and some, they're logged in. They might not be working on everything right now, or they're printing things out. They still like the tactile methods of learning. So some do tell me, through GroupMe or texting, that they printed out the work that I have on Google Classroom because that's the way that we did it in the classroom. So some have expressed that they really do miss being in the classroom and they cannot wait to come back. It has been hard for a few of them to accept this reality. We do not know how long, but the ones that have called me and actually feeling very anxious have said, you know what, I'm back on board. I'm ready to study. I'm ready to study. I needed some time to work with my family and just absorb all this that's going on, wrap my head around this whole pandemic situation, but now I'm ready to come back and study. So that has really been good. I think the reason why this has progressed very well is that I'm very consistent in reaching out to students. If they do not reply within a few days, I try and get a hold of them a different way. This has been the biggest challenge, I would say, for me as their teacher. I am a team teacher. I teach the reading portion of the social studies, and my team teacher, Claudia Soto, teaches the math and science. So I'm working on one, and while she's working on the other. But to follow up, we cannot forget to follow up. I know sometimes that is probably one of the most challenging things. I too have gotten a little, I would say, a little frustrated. I'm going to be honest with you. When they don't respond right away. However, I think it is really, really good that you just keep following and not to give up, not to give up. These families are going through their own anxiety issues, work issues, financial, ongoing technological, and even with their pets. You know, a couple of them have already called me. My pet passed away, so they're grieving other things besides losing time with other family members that they cannot see, coming to school, their children going to school. So it's a lot of grace, a lot of grit, yet a lot of grace. And motivation. So now I started implementing DoorDash prizes that was started on our team to get everybody to go into Google Classroom and to stay connected that way remotely. So I do DoorDash prizes. I did actually, and I'm still doing this, handwriting cards. And I printed out just something simple, just a little message to each student. I wrote something different in each card, but everybody received the same little note that I printed out from online, and I cut it out and sent those. And I've gotten the most responses from that, actually. It takes time. I'm not used to handwriting. I've had to work on my handwriting skills. So each student really seems to respond very well to the handwritten cards. And Twitter posts of successes. Our director really loves to promote our successes, and it is such a good motivator. Successes amongst our team at Community Ed Center, teachers and students alike. Even if you think they might be small, they're huge, because this is something everybody is going through. Nobody lives on an island right now, and we all need to be supportive and unified. And I really feel that way with my team. So again, support. I know I've mentioned this throughout, but you know, my Community Ed Center team, the District Service Center for also their emails, what's going on as a region and as a state and nationally, and TCAL for their ongoing webinars, and Texas Workforce Commission. We also are working with the local Boardaplex. I work with Diana. She has been wonderful with our youth job skills. So here's my remote digital story. These are, it's kind of everywhere right now. And I just really feel, no, you can go back to the other slide. I feel like this has just been a neat way to really see, okay, what's being illuminated here? What do I want my students to take from this? What is our purpose? And I feel like the purpose is just to continue. It might be different ways of learning and different ways of teaching, but I think that's important. So you can see these pictures. There's the twins working on their laptop, I think an hour after they had taken it home from the District Service Center. They've been on fire. That was my first Zoom meeting, just with 2 students at that point, but they are gradually coming on. Some don't like their faces shown. So you can see in the opposite sides, we have a personal note from one of my students. She's returning on the left side. And then on the right side, sometimes that's how we learn and teach synchronously. So you can use GroupMe for either one, direct messaging or whole group. So that's a good way to answer. And then the bottom part is the actual distribution at the District Service Center. In the top left-hand corner, my student writing her notes on a figurative language next to her laptop. So, and then just to stay focused. So here are some digital resources and platforms. Google Classroom and GroupMe are the ones in the middle, because those are pretty much the go-to. The cell phone, if a student doesn't have enough data on their phone, I call or FaceTime or text message. So Common Lit, we've been using that all year. We kind of stopped and then kind of restarted it. And then also the other resources I have put into the Google Classroom to share with my students. And I just think everything has been working really well. I just am very excited about the support and that we are enduring.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing what's going on there in El Paso. Great story. And I just love the variability and the kind of feedback of how your leadership at your local level kind of helps support you in that progress, Melanie. I'm going to turn it over to Glenda Rose, who wears 2 hats. She's an instructor in ESL, but she's also a coordinator for a large rural area. So Glenda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So yes, I am a coordinator. This gives you a snapshot of the different kinds of things we're doing, all kinds of classes going on before the pandemic shutdown happened. So we can just go ahead. I'll let you know a little bit about Community Action, Inc. We are one of the grantees for adult education through Texas Workforce Commission. We are the donut around Austin. So we have the 9 counties that are around Austin, and these counties are very rural. Cows, trees, chickens crossing the road kind of thing. And we're kind of situated. We have a lot of different sites in our counties. I'm responsible for 3 of them, the 3 closest to Houston. And we have about 20 classes going on. That's okay. We can keep going. So when we realized that there was going to be a problem, when one of our sites that had the early spring break wasn't coming back, we figured that the other ones weren't going to be coming back either. So on March 14th, I started talking with my staff about what are we going to do if we don't come back from spring break. And as soon as spring break started, the rest of the counties and the school districts announced that we would not be coming back from spring break at least until April. So the week of spring break, my teachers didn't get spring break because we had staff meetings. And one of those was very important about deciding how we were going to keep our students engaged until we could get back into a physical classroom. Spring break ended on Friday, March 20th. We had another meeting on March 21st on how to use Zoom specifically, on March 23rd rather, and then immediately went back to classes on March 25th. So my students in most of the counties lost 2 days, if anything. So one part of this is dealing with the teachers and getting the teachers and the staff. Can you go back one? The teachers and the staff ready. Oh no, I'm sorry, you're right. When we had the staff meeting, some of the things that we thought about was consolidating classes. So all of the HSE classes in the different counties at the different sites in the evening, we put them all together. And what we decided to do was to let the teachers teach to their strengths. So we would have multiple teachers, but we would use the breakout rooms. So students would come into the main room, and then they would go to a breakout room for science or math or social studies or what have you. This created the advantage of being able to pair instructors who were more tech savvy with instructors who were less tech savvy. So that's the you teach, I'll host idea, that one teacher was more or less responsible for getting the room set up, for setting up the breakout rooms, and making sure that everything, the attendance got taken and that students were participating appropriately. We also set up a page on our website so that the students would have the full roster of classes available, and they could go to any class at any time because schedules changed with the kids home, people's job schedules changed. So we wanted them to know that they had flexibility. They did not have to go to the same class they had always gone to. We did find that using Zoom was a challenge for some of our students, especially since they were on their phones. And so we created some videos on and screenshots of how to use Zoom on their phones. But the big key for us was we didn't want to change anything drastically for 2 weeks. We wanted to give both the teachers and the students an opportunity to get acclimated to the new environment before we started adding fancier tools. Other things that we did, we communicate every day. I text, call, whatever needs to be done with the students, email, however we can get a hold of them, we communicate with them every day just to check in on them and see how they're doing, remind them about classes. And then we planned and we did evaluate and went on to change things around. So this is most of my staff, not everybody's here. And some of these staff members, as you can see, there's a wide range of ages. I will say that does not necessarily a factor. My oldest teacher is over 80, and she was one of the few that said, nope, I don't need a host, I can fly solo, and has done a fantastic job. She contacts me when she needs advice or help, or texts me when she has a technical problem so I can jump into her classroom, but she's fantastic. So it's not necessarily an age thing. Some of the problems that we have being rural is some of our teachers do not have connectivity. So then we have to have other options for those teachers, what they're going to be doing so we can keep them employed during this. Also getting their skills up. It was frustrating the first 2 weeks, getting the feel for things. We had teachers telling me, I don't know how to do this. And I would have to say, well, that's why you're learning. But eventually they all started picking it up. And this is my favorite quote. After I had a little mini session with one of my teachers, To my online teaching colleagues, I struggled my first few days of classes and was so discouraged. I had a half-hour session with Glenda on Wednesday. Today in planning for my class, I used the tools and resources, and I think I mentioned 2. I'm here to say that tonight my class worked. In fact, I may have had more participation than in the physical classroom. Teaching was a joy again. So it is definitely something that they learned to do and learned to do quickly. I'm so proud of the group. And they turned around and took that growth mindset to their students. The 2 pictures in the center, the gentleman with the white hair, he's our career coordinator, Dale Burke, and he has done a fantastic job of getting a hold of every HSE student to make sure that they're taken care of, that they have any needs that we can address. And then next to him with the dark hair, that's Margarita. She's our support specialist, and she has called every ESL student to see where they are. And one advantage we did have is most of these classes, we had WhatsApp groups for the classes before they started, so we were already in a constant communication with them. So I want to tell you about some of the successes from our students. I want to tell you about my friend Michelle. Michelle is an HSE student. He's from Africa, but he is excited about his math progress online, and he's ready to take his GED practice test in math, so he's very excited. Esmeralda is a kind of a different story. So she was not coming to face-to-face classes, but as soon as we went to online, she asked for permission to jump back in. Of course, I said, no, of course I said, yes, you can come back in anytime. So she has been coming and been very faithful for the online classes, even though she struggled a little bit because of rural connectivity with getting on to Zoom, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Jose, he took his practice test in the middle of this in social studies and ended up with a 152 and is just waiting to find out when and if the GED is going to be offered online. Ashley, also from Africa, she is a GED and an ESL student. She's in both. And she has just showed such extreme dedication. She impresses me because she comes to every class on Zoom, on HSE, ESL, and then also on WhatsApp. So the connectivity problem for rural areas is a serious issue. Some of my students have to go outside to talk on the phone. They don't have the ability to get onto Zoom even on their phones because there's just not enough connectivity. I couldn't give them a hotspot. The hotspot wouldn't even work out there. So what we've done is found that doing the lessons on WhatsApp is live lessons, just as Melanie was saying about Meet Me or Group Me, works very well for live lessons, and we found that there's good participation in those. Then I have Anna, who's an integrated EL civics student who was just about ready to take her Microsoft Office Specialist exam right before all this has shut down, and she's taking the opportunity to continue to work on those projects that she needs to finish to be able to take the exam. So the students have shown such resiliency. I'm just very proud of all of them. The teachers have really modeled it for them. And let's see, if you want to go to the next one, there is one on here that didn't make the cut. I didn't put his picture up here. I have one student, we'll just go over here to Abel. Abel had just registered, that's why I don't have a picture, but he didn't miss a beat. He kept attending. Another student had been incarcerated since 1993. He had been paroled on January 1 of this year and still started classes in February. So if you think about that, 1993 to 2020, he missed the entire digital revolution. He did not know how to take a test on a computer. I had to get a touchscreen computer for him to be able to test. And he had been missing since all this started. And the reason he's not on here is I just saw him show up in class last week when I was doing attendance. And it just made my heart happy that he's back and he's working on his HSE. I'll look at Veronica just for time's sake. In the second picture, Veronica is also an integrated EL civics and an ESL student. And she had to drop classes in February because she had a very, very negative medical visit that she was going to have to take some treatments. And she has come back since we've gone online. So it worked out to her benefit for us to go online. It makes me think that we should be doing more of these live online, even when we get out of the pandemic. And then Antonia, she's an English language for professionals student as well as regular ESL. She works at the school district and she is attending everything that she can and making progress, and I can hear the difference in her English already in just a few weeks. So I'm very proud of all the students. And I think the big lesson for me was be creative. I can't always use Zoom because I don't have students who always have connectivity. My director is awesome. He's talking about buying tablets or Chromebooks that we can lend out That will work for the people who are inside the city limits. It won't work so well for the people out in the county. But at least they have options. We've suggested that they go sit at the McDonald's in town to take their lesson, or outside of the schools. Most of the school, the Wi-Fi extends into the parking lots. And like someone had mentioned, the churches also. So just getting creative with the students about how they can continue to participate, and being very flexible with their needs, changing times and schedules as we've needed to make sure that students could participate and not conflict with their kids being online, or having to go pick up food from the food bank or pick up packets from the school if we're out in the rural areas. So that's pretty much everything that I want to tell you. I just am so proud of them for everything they've done.
Thank you very much, Glenda. Just great. Both you and Melanie brought a lot of information. I wanted to respond to some of the questions that we saw in the Q&A. And, you know, Glenda answered a lot of the rural area access questions I know we had coming through. And that's a considerable challenge. And that's why having multiple options served us well in many ways. I mean, 50% of Texas only has like less than 5 individuals that are impacted by the virus. So you can, that shows you right there, less than 5 in 50% of the state, which means lots of rural area. It's Texas, it's big. So having these options really helps out in terms of giving lots of tools that a teacher like Glenda or coordinator or Melanie can use as they deploy. There were some questions on counting direct hours. And one of the things I'll say is we're gonna make the PowerPoint available. I put in the websites for the things that we've referenced. Our frequently asked question document, which is 37 pages long, answers almost every question that I've seen in the question and answer area. So if you go dig into that, you'll see what Texas said about that. You'll have to see what your own states feel about that, but this is what our call is, and we're usually right. But we have information on processes for loaning laptops. You heard Melanie talk about how they did it out in El Paso, which that was a real eye-opener for me. She said they prioritized the children's laptops first, and then they started working with the adults. We've provided additional funding for those types of resources to be provided locally, tablets, laptops, hotspots, and then all the applications, including social media applications and social messaging. We have information on how to serve new students, and that's the phase we're in now. I'm a workforce fella, and so unemployment means people come back to education. That's just like science for us. And so we're seeing new students come in. We get phone calls and emails every day. And so we created a whole structure. You can read it in our FAQ document on doing distance intake. And determining eligibility at a distance. So if you're a coordinator, director type person, that we've answered those questions. We figured them out with a lot of consideration. So I feel really good about them. And then information on the different DL platforms we're using for sure is out there. Were there other questions that anybody saw that thought needed to be answered? Sharon or Glenda, anybody else looking at the chat or the Q&A?
So we did have a question, Anson, about, with so much extensive, robust experience with distance learning in Texas, what are your outcomes when compared to face-to-face delivery?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. We've been tracking outcomes, specifically measurable skills gain, on that one metric and that dimension. And in Texas, our students that we look at 3 different types of students: those that are fully or more than 50% remote, so they're logging proxy hours in RS tabling, those that are doing a hybrid, and then those that are not doing any. And the hybrid students, those that are getting some distance and some classroom brick and mortar, consistently outperform at a significant level the students that are doing wholly remote and those that are in brick and mortar, because largely I would imagine more time on task. So we have tracked that for 5 years. It's always been higher when they go remote. and when they do distance. And so I think I see lots of wins for what's happening right now, because it has pushed our system further into remote being a standard procedure. That gives students, you heard Glenda talk about these students that weren't coming to class, now they are because they can do it from home. It meets the hours of day because they can schedule flexibly. The remote testing will be the same thing. I have people that have to drive 150 miles to take a test. That's ridiculous if we can deliver it remotely. So I see lots of innovation happening right now that's going to stick with us. I'm viewing everything as like things for the emergency, and then things we're doing for the emergency, but they're going to stick. I'm really excited about that. Other questions that you saw?
I just wanted to add to that one teacher who said she was getting more participation in her online class than her face-to-face. So I think not changing things too quickly and getting everyone acclimated may be a key there to making sure that the students who are not as well prepared don't feel that shift so much. We had another question about, are you doing things like financial literacy, health literacy, and training related to particular occupations?
Yes, I'm glad that came up. We're doing all those things, and actually we just got highlighted out in Beaumont, Texas, near Louisiana on the southeast coast. Online IET, integrated education and training, going on in phlebotomy, believe it or not, and that got highlighted in the local newspaper. So in the integrated education and training space, our focus right now is, in this new realm, two things. What are the types of training that can be delivered remotely? Because of course not everything can. And then more importantly, I think, and this is one as an agency we're really doing analysis of, what industry recognized credentialing is open. And I think that's going to be the next shoe to drop in terms of access. Can you go take these industry recognized credentials remotely? Because many a times they have practicum, they're on site. And how is that going to be addressed? Because as a workforce agency, we need to train people to get them into the workforce. Our adult ed providers all do IET in large numbers, and we got to keep those services happening. Great question. I was going to mention something else. I saw a lot of questions on the remote testing as we get close to the end here. If you're at a school district, local LEA, or at a community college, it's very likely that you're not going to reopen this summer. In Texas, most of them will not open this summer. Maybe the fall, there'll be these shutdowns for these public entities that serve other customers as their main customer, college students or public school students. If you're an adult ed program, I think it's time to start thinking about alternate locations in the community that might be open, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, workforce development board areas that may be open, that you could start to offer services through, and more importantly, testing. When the high school equivalency tests come online, which is right around the corner in the month or so, your testing site at a college may not open all summer. Your school district testing site may not open, but the test is available. And I've had discussions with the test publishers about making those tests available off-site locations in private testing firms, in workforce boards. Those are things that you should start exploring, because you don't want to hold up a student's success because a college or school district's not open for the summer or into the fall. This is going to be with us for the next year or so easily. And this inconsistency and turbulence is the new normal. We've got to really build for that. So with that, I want to wish everybody well. I know we're getting at the end here, and I'll turn it over to Sharon. Texas loves you out there. We want to help. Send me an email. Check our stuff out. We like to help our staff, our students in Texas, but we like to help others just as much. Thank you.
Anson, what a fantastic webinar. Thank you. Thank you to you and Glenda and Melanie. We truly appreciate it. I'm going to take a moment here to turn this back to Robert Breitbart, and while he's speaking, I'm going to launch a poll. So Robert, our sponsor.
Yes, thank you ever so much. And to everyone who participated, you're superheroes for taking the time out of your day to not just bring, adult education, continued learners, learning to your folks, but also to be part of their, what keeps everybody together right now. They love you. They love their teachers, and for all you're doing to continue that going, and all these amazing creative ideas. from coast to coast, but particularly to all our friends at TCAL and Texas TWC and everyone out there in the COABE. Thank you very much. And I would just say, if you haven't seen Burlington English lately, we've got an entirely new Burlington English, Burlington Core. So all these great ideas about whether it's tablets or smartphones and all the support, and to keep standards based, you know, you can do all this so that gains can still make, success can still happen. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sharon. And again, we're really proud. So many years now, Sharon. Thanks for bringing that up. From all of us at Burlington English. Thank you, Anson. Turn it back to all of you.
Great, thank you. And I would just say a couple of things really kind of caught my ear as I was listening in on this webinar. One is that there was, you know, the leadership at the top, providing what was needed and the, you know, forging ahead and all these innovative ideas. But as I was listening, and many of our members are those teachers and administrators, right? And hearing all those personal touches, I'm calling them, I'm sending them handwritten letters, I'm, you know, really going out of my way to make sure they come to class. And then when I heard at the end of it, you know, it almost seems like we're going to innovate and it's going to be even better because of this. So when it's all said and done, we'll actually have more adult learners who will be able to participate because they'll be able to participate remotely. I mean, to me, that is the silver lining as we're going through this huge crisis as a field together, right? Hearing you say that, Anson, you know, at the end, more adult learners will probably be served as a result of this. I just want to say I was just so encouraged. And so I feel very hopeful after attending this webinar. So thank you for that.
Many thanks. Thank you. Yes, I truly believe we've kind of reset so many expectations and what we can do. And if you're a local leader, you definitely need to be thinking that this is the new normal, I think, for us. The test publishers, I don't think, are going to want to go back after the investments they're making in going remote and seeing the benefit of new people coming into our system.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. We look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. And thank you again to Anson and Glenda, and also to Melanie. And thank you to all of you who took your time out of your day today. We appreciate it. And certificate of attendance will come to you within 24 hours. Thanks so much. Thanks, Robert. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay healthy, everybody. Great job, everyone. Be well.
Bye now.